Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, what's up, guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this video, we are bringing back an old series. It wasn't really ever a series, but I did make, well, I guess it was a series. I made a series of videos where I compared a bunch of different figures of the same character, and you guys really liked those videos, but it's been a long time since I've done it. So for this video, I thought with the end of YouTube coming and all that kind of stuff, it'd be a good time to look back at one of the more popular characters that we've ever looked at, and this is, obviously, Captain America. Obviously, it's Spider-Man, and so we are going to look at every Marvel Legends Spider-Man figure that has ever been made, plus a bunch of extra ones from the sister line Spider-Man Classics, and some other things that popped up here and there with various other names and things like that. And so I do want to make one note. This is not including movie figures except for a couple, which I wanted to include just to make everybody happy, which they're still going to not be. But I didn't want to include movie figures. It would be too many, and most of them aren't all that good. So this is all the comic book figures with a few movie ones included. Now, before we get into it, and we are going to change the camera, and I'll be doing stuff here. Don't worry, I'm not just going to point. It'll be more engaging. Just give me a second. Let me get there. We're building up to it. I do want to take a minute just to note that I released 2 videos recently about this whole end of YouTube situation, and I was met with considerably supportive comments. And I just want to say to you guys, all of you who watched those videos or commented or messaged me or anything about that I really do appreciate the support. It means a whole bunch. And then I also did get some of the most vile, hateful, negative comments I've ever seen, and those people can kiss my spider ham. Largely, though, it was a very positive situation, and that is ironic because it's coming out of a very negative situation, potentially, and only time will tell. We'll see how that goes. And so because of that, I do want to take another minute, just to talk about today's sponsor of the video, which is me. I want to talk about the channel just for a very brief moment, in case things do go south quickly, and there's no time for me to let you guys know ahead of time. I do want to let you know, assuming I don't just get shut down completely going forward. We don't know if that's going to happen, but it could. I do have a bunch of other social media outlets which will be potentially useful for disseminating my videos. So if you are on the various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, I'm on all of those things, and there are links in the description below, so make sure you check those out, just in case all of a sudden you're no longer seeing notifications or even seeing the channel at all. There are other outlets, so go ahead and check those out. And then one last thing, this is just kind of a prelude to what's to come on the channel, assuming things don't get shut down. My Beast head sale. I know he looks really pale right now because he's really close to the lighting because of my weird setup. You can see how the focus is it's nice bokeh. Anyway, the Beast head sale. I've almost completed the orders. There's one more batch I'm in the middle of working on. Once those are done, I will have one batch of leftover heads to sell in a second chance sale, painted heads. And I will also have some unpainted and unfinished heads available for sale. Also, I just want to let you guys know that is coming. It's right around the corner. If you're one of the last few people that placed an order, you will be getting yours filled in the very near future, like by the end of this coming week, probably, depending on when I upload this. And so the second chance sale will be coming soon for this Beast head, the glasses and everything like that. Maybe not books. I don't know if I have enough to include those, but either way, there will be a video for that. Don't ask me about selling anything now. There will be a video. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. No pun intended. And then, more good news for those of you who have been seeing this one in the videos. Once the Beast second chance head sale is done, we will be doing the Gambit head sale. And there will be 2 options. You see this one right here is the one with the orangish red hair, more directly related to the cartoon. I did base this on that, but I didn't want it to be completely because it's just a little bit ridiculous the way they did his hair in the cartoon. But anyway, you'll have the opportunity to buy either this one or the one with brown hair, or both, which is what I would recommend because I like money. But the Gambit head sale will be happening very soon after the second chance sale for Beast. Maybe even concurrently. We'll see about that. But I wanted to give you guys a heads up because it will be happening. And again, I like money. Okay, so for this video, we have, like I said, a bunch of Spider-Man figures. I'm not going to just point at them. I'm going to grab each one and talk about it very briefly. So this video, which has already gone on for over 5 minutes, I think, is going to be really long. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm assuming you clicked on this to see the stuff in the video, and so I'm going to show you this stuff. So let's go ahead and adjust the camera and get a closer look. Okay, now before we get into this, again, there's another before we get into it. I know, but this is going to be a serious video. There's lots of stuff going on here, so just give me a second here to get you guys prepared. you need to be prepared for what's about to happen. I did not refresh my memory on any of this stuff before we started. I kind of wanted to see how much I could remember on each of these guys before we get going. And so, if I do say something wrong, you can go ahead and correct it in the comment section below. But I think I'm going to have it mostly right. I'm pretty sure I have it. And also, I've reviewed, I think, every single one of these figures on the channel, so you can check out my Spider-Man playlist if you want to see more details about anything you find particularly interesting. I think there maybe are a couple that I haven't, but I'll talk about them a little bit. Alright, so the first one we're going to start off with is probably the best of the bunch, and this is Spider-Ham, which is hardly even considered a Spider-Man character, or Spider-Man Peter Parker. I guess he's, Spider-Ham, so not really, but kind of. Why are there eyes on his nose? I never really commented on that before that I can remember, and that's kind of weird. It's like they saw, hey, it's round. Let's put eyes on it. It doesn't make sense. He's got 4 eyes. It's a 4-eyed pig wearing a spider costume. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, this figure is absolutely garbage. Terrible, worst figure of the year it came out, and you should never, ever, ever, ever pay anything more than a couple of dollars for it because it's a novel item in your collection. Moving on. We're just going to work our way back so that I don't knock everything over constantly as we're talking. Here we have the Urban Legends Spider-Man. I'm also going to go in no particular order other than, like I said, from front to back. And this one is from a box set, but you're most likely going to just find it solo at this point. You'll probably find box sets on eBay if you really want to, but you probably don't. Nowadays, these are very dated. But this is one which was for a long time considered the best cartoon-looking Spider-Man. And it's completely smooth, and it's darker blue, and kind of a less saturated red, but it does have some of the appeal of the older cartoon from the 90s, and it does articulate very nicely. It does obviously have very bulbous joints, and is kind of lanky, but you'll find that even with the newest Spider-Man figures, there's none that really don't sacrifice something. So a lot of this, I know a lot of you are going to want me to pick my favorites, and I might do that, but I definitely don't know. We'll see by the end of the video if I want to pick the best, because there are so many factors to consider. It's going to be really down to personal preference. So here is the Urban Legends Spider-Man in the dark blue and kind of normal red. And then to go with that one, this was part of a sister line. I believe this was in the Spider-Man Classics line. There's about 1 million different Spider-Man figures in that line, so I don't have all of them, and I don't know all the names of all of them. But this is the exact same figure, just for comparison's sake. Slightly different red and very different blue. It's very metallic, and it's very teal. That's a valid look for Spider-Man. I know a lot of people like it, so I wanted you to know this does exist if you want to get it. It is very loose for mine. I'm guessing most of them have become loose over time, and so you're just going to have to deal with that. Most of these older ones, especially Toy Biz, are very, very loose jointed, so be careful. But they do exist, and they do still have some things that are better than some of the contemporary figures. So I thought it would be nice to at least show them to you, and now you've seen it. So we're going to move on. Next up, we're going to look at the Teenage Spider-Man figure. These are some of the more recent releases, not too close, but pretty recent, and it's a typical Hasbro figure. You can tell because there's no shape front to back at all, and decent shape from front to back this way, side to side. What's the word? I don't know. Sleep. But you can see this is the teenage Peter Parker. He's very much shorter than the other figures. You can't tell from that angle, so I'll do this. And you can tell now that he's a tiny little guy. And it's really not a bad figure. It's not great, but it's perfectly fine. And it did have another release in this one, which came in a 2-pack, I believe. Yes, it was a 2-pack release, I think. And it has a lighter blue and a little bit more saturated red. And if it was up to me, I would say buy this one without even thinking about it if you're interested in one of the smaller build Peters. This one is just not anywhere near as appealing unless you happen to like the darker blue with a tiny bit of yellow in it. For me, the brighter blue and the brighter red just make this figure pop, and it is a relatively strong release. I'm not going to note anything about the articulation on these guys unless something stands out, and so I think that'll be okay. And hopefully it is. Again, check the reviews if you want to. Next up, we have the Miles Morales figure, which is the exact same one as this one. I'm not going to go over accessories either, by the way. We'd be here all day. So if you see one figure with hands and one without, check the individual review to make sure which hands it includes. I'm guessing they both included both whipping and fist hands on both sides, but again, check the review. So anyway, exact same figure, just different paint, and honestly, it looks really good. In fact, it's my favorite of the smaller figure builds. It just really stands out nice. The red paint job on there is super clean, and the all black plastic is what it's supposed to be, so that's fine, and then the eyes are nice and bright, and I really, really enjoy this black and red Spider-Man. I hope it wasn't out of focus the whole time. If it was, well, oh well. Okay, moving on to a figure and another figure which are probably lesser known than most of the other ones on this table right now. These guys, I'm pretty sure they're part of the Spider-Man Classics line. I'm not 100% sure because it was old and I wasn't collecting at the time, but these guys are both Spider-Sense Spider-Man figures. They have holes in their back, and you could connect them to a base which would make their eyes light up. And I don't have the bases to show you that, unfortunately, but I think it's still worth showing you these guys because we do have a unique color scheme in this one, and that it's the lighter blue with the more saturated red, and that's only seen kind of in two of these upcoming figures that I'm going to be showing you. And then we do have the black and red also with heavy shading. But if you wanted to paint the eyes white, I think you'd have a pretty solid looking Spider-Man figure on your hands. The articulation is very dated in the hips and in the thighs, but the rest is pretty much standard even to this day. I guess the heads are a little bit more limited due to the eye mechanic, but still, if you don't mind a skinny Spider-Man, it's one of the better, anatomically speaking, Spider-Man builds, and a lot of them are skinny, so I think that might be something people are okay with. So I wanted to show you guys these. There's some variation of Spider-Sense or something like that. I know that, at least for one of them, that was the case, and probably the other as well. All right. Another one, which I actually don't know much about this one. I thought this one was actually Marvel Legends, not Spider-Man Classics, but at the time they were basically synonymous. They were essentially the same thing, except the Spider-Man Classics line had usually less articulation, and I'm thinking that's why this one's like kind of weird looking, but I'm not positive. Again, I don't know every little detail about every one of these guys. I've failed you. I'm sorry, but I'm doing the best I can. So you have to give it to me. That's how it works these days. Anyway, this is a winking Spider-Man, and I think this is based on a particular cover. But the thing I like about this one is it's very unique looking. It doesn't look like any of the other ones. I like that they did a little bit of shading in the stomach that's a little bit more heavy, and it's not continued anywhere else. But it does look really cool, and I like the style of it. It's definitely a dated looking figure. There's a little bit more shading on the back, and it's just kind of a unique figure. So it's worth tracking down. Again, I don't know any more about this one. I think I did at one point, and I maybe talked about it in a video, but I don't know anymore. But it still looks really cool, so it's worth. If nothing else, you at least know that it exists now, and you can track it down for yourself. Let's go ahead and look at this one right here. This is from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, I think the second one he did, the second movie, and it was for a while the go-to Spider-Man figure. It's obviously more based on the comics than some of the previous designs for the movies, and it was a really solid figure. It still is in many ways. You see, we do have this weird bubbly situation for his chest because of the butterfly joint, but it still articulates really well, and it does have an overall comic aesthetic. All in all, it's a pretty nice figure if you don't mind some of the issues like the weird hips and weird shoulders. I think a lot of people still like it, and you might, so I wanted to include it in this video. Next up, let's look at this one. This one is the Snapshot Spider-Man. I don't know which part of the subline, if it was Spider-Man Classics or one of the later iterations. I think it was Spider-Man Classics. But the cool thing about this one is, like I mentioned for the one, this guy, where it's not a common color combination that we get to see. This one is probably the most unique in terms of color combination because we have that super light blue, which is very saturated, and then a nice bright red, which is also very saturated. I know what you're thinking. He looks like he's made out of grapes. And you're right, he's very bubbly, and that was a common thing back then. And it's unfortunate that it is that way now, but it is still one of the more popular ones, even though it's lost some of its fame recently. It's very cool looking for what it is. You have to remember these are older figures, and they were doing things, man. They have unique articulation, unique sculpts, very different from what we see today, and we'll get to that when every Spider-Man figure has almost the exact same build. So I want to kind of pivot from that to this one. This one is I want to say it's from the Sinister Six-Pack. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. It's almost the same figure, except it's not. This one has texture throughout the entire suit, or at least the blue parts, whereas this one had the bright blue one had smooth suit. This one has texture. But it is mostly the same figure, slightly different head, but overall the same design, just with the darker blue and paler red. Again, they are both very loose, like a lot of the older figures are, but once you pose these guys, the bubbliness kind of goes away, and they look really dynamic and fun, and they have lots of shading on them, as you can see. So there is something to be said for these older figures. We're going to talk about a lot of the newer ones as this video goes on, because I happen to stack them in the back, but I'd like you guys to keep an open mind. If you're a more recent collector and you're not familiar with these older ones, there may be a little bit of bubbly body part shock when you first see them, but give them a chance. I think there's something to like about them. At least the amount of care that went into building them. They may not be perfect, but there's something about them which makes them stand out compared to some of the newer figures. So that one is Sinister Six-Pack, I believe. And that would make this one Fearsome Foes. I always get those two confused, but I think I got it right. And so this one is built on one of the most famous Spider-Man bodies we've seen from any toy company ever. The same body that this guy uses, which we'll talk about in just a second. So this guy has a very skinny body, and it doesn't look great when it's not posed. When it is posed, it looks just fine, and he can achieve some pretty nice poses. This one does have the webbing on his back. I've never been a fan of that, but it has it if you want it. If you don't want it, you can take it off. But he does have that kind of like almost a periwinkle, very light purpley blue and the relatively dark red. One of my least favorite figures, honestly. I don't like this combination of head design or colors or anything, but he does exist. This one, on the other hand, is, or at least was at one point, the most popular Spider-Man figure ever. And if you add it up all throughout history, he may still technically be, but he has been kind of dethroned by some more recent releases, especially at a higher price point. But this is the quote-unquote McFarlane Spider-Man, which is, like I said, very skinny and doesn't look necessarily great when he's not posed, but you can pose him very well, and he does look really cool once he's posed. And he's got the more neutrally blue and a little bit more of a neutral red, so he's not going to stand out on the shelf as much like that, but he does have the unique eyes, and just, he's a very fun figure to pose, and it's kind of like a rite of passage. If you have this one, you're probably okay. If you didn't get this one, you should, or kids on the playground are going to make fun of you. Oh, shoot. I referenced kids. They're going to get me. It was a joke. I didn't mean it. There's no kids watching my videos. Anyway, really good figure. Definitely has some issues, but that's okay. Let's look at this one. This one is one of the earlier Marvel Legends figures. I guess it's not that early, but it's early compared to now. This is the first appearance Spider-Man. It does share some similar types of features in that it has some really nice sculpting, some organic sculpting. However, his articulation is a lot more hindered, and he's just kind of a little bit less dynamic looking. However, it is very accurate to the source material, and the paint job is very clean, so I can see a lot of people really liking this. He does have the webbing on his back, and so again, if you like that, cool. If you don't, take it off. The thing that's always bothered me about this guy is how square his crotch is. Never been a fan of square crotches, but he does have a very, very square crotch. Again, not a bad release. It's all black and red, so it does have that look for it, and it's fairly posable if you get one that's not too loose or too stiff or something like that. These older ones, they run the gamut for articulation problems. Here we have one of the current MCU Spider-Man figures. This one, I believe, is from the Civil War 3-pack, which had Cap and Iron Man in it. And I included this one because I have it, and some of the other ones I don't have anymore. But this one also can easily be substituted as a comic book Spider-Man, so it does make for a good inclusion in this list. It's a very dark blue with the black and red. Not very movie accurate, but it's not a bad figure. You can get it in some decent poses, and it does have a smaller build, so if you're into that sort of thing, it's alright. But it's not bad. It's not good for what it's supposed to be, but it could be good for you if it's what you're looking for, and you can find it at the right price. Speaking of movie Spider-Mans, I'm running out of arm reach. I can't grab these. I wish I had some webbing. Anyway, this one is the magnet hands from, I think, the second Tobey Maguire movie. His magnet's breaking. Some people really like the magnet hands. I'm not a fan, but I happen to have this. I have no idea why I have it, but other than my 18-inch one, this is the only one I have from these movies. And these figures were surprisingly good, especially for the time. They are loaded with sculpt. The anatomy is a little bit questionable in the chest, but they are completely textured. Every part of them is textured, whether it's webbing or the blue part. There's a lot of paint on there. I know a lot of people hate the gray webbing from these movies, but it's on the figure. The spider is sculpted and painted. It's not the best figure in every way, but in some ways, it's a really great figure. And this one happens to be able to climb on your refrigerator. So I would definitely recommend, if you don't have a problem with the silver webbing, check out some of these older Tobey Maguire Spider-Man figures. They are, at the time, or for the time, exceptional, and even now they still have a nice little look to them. And I think you might enjoy them. I do, and I was never a huge fan of those movies in particular. I mean, like, they were fine, but I'm not biased in any way. It's just a kind of a cool figure. It kind of reminds me of a different time. How many figures these days do we find that have texture and detailing like this? Not too many, so I wanted to include it. And since we're going to include that one, which is loaded with good stuff, let's go ahead and talk about this one. This is one of the offshoot lines that's a little bit more recent, so I have no idea what it was called. They just kind of throw names together. And this is a Miles Morales Spider-Man, or I guess was it Ultimate Spider-Man that he took this suit? Again, I don't remember every little detail, but this figure was not a Marvel Legends. It does use some of the same parts, but it is overall a pile of garbage. The head barely moves. The figure overall looks really cheap. The proportions are awful. He looks like a hunchback. Don't buy this. It has been replaced by that other one, which I already showed you, which is way, 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 way better, and this one sucks all kinds of butt, so don't buy that. Oh, let's go ahead and talk about this one. This is a reissue, essentially, and a recolor of the McFarlane Spider-Man. This was released later on and a couple of different times, and so it's a little bit easier to come by. It's usually a lot cheaper. There have been, unfortunately, knockoffs of this one, so be careful if you're going on eBay. I don't know if there's any good way to get around it. I guess don't buy loose, but either way, it's the exact same figure as the McFarlane one, but it comes in black and red rather than the blue and red. So if you're into that sort of thing, or if you just like to collect these, then this is a good one to get. He tends to be less loose. He's a newer release, and he tends to have tighter joints, so you just have to kind of hope. I sure hope the camera hasn't been pulling focus the whole time. If that's the case, this video is going to suck. I'm going to have to redo it. Sure hope that's not the case. But anyway, it's a solid release in terms of the articulation being a little bit tighter, and it does reuse the entire sculpt of the McFarlane Spider-Man. So if you like black and red, this one might be one you want to check out. Let's move on to this one, which is probably one of the worst ones that we're going to be looking at here. He is the Ben Reilly Spider-Man, so you've got the webbing on the legs and the wristbands and different color schemes and whatnot, but they just really screwed the pooch on the color. This guy's like pale blue, pale red, and really terrible anatomy, terrible articulation. This is from the era of Hasbro where they didn't care about the Marvel Legends, or at least they didn't do a good job with them, one way or the other. I know you're thinking, that sounds like now. I shouldn't have said that. That's mean, I'm sorry. But it is not a particularly good figure. The articulation is just acceptable in most cases, and in some cases it's really bad. And the color scheme's bad, the anatomy's not good, so it's been replaced by a better figure. So don't get this one if you're into Ben Reilly, unless you really, really just want to collect all of them. I'll show you in a minute which one you should get if you're into this particular look for a Spooder guy. Speaking of particular looks for Spooder guy, let's take a look at this one, which is a recent release, so this should be no surprise to you guys if you've been around the channel at all in the past few weeks. This is the new PS4 Spider-Man Advanced Suit Spider-Man, which is not a perfect figure, but it's pretty darn good. They nailed the paint job with all the white on there, and it's one of the better bodies Hasbro's been using for the Marvel Legends. The only thing that really drives me nuts about this one is the head, because it's a reused head from Spider UK, and it doesn't really suit the character as well as it could, but all in all, it has some pretty good sculpting, some really nice paintwork, and it's a good representation of the character. And it doesn't cost a fortune like the Figure Arts one, which was a pile of dog poop. So if you like the PS4 look, this might be the way to go. This one is from the Peter Parker Mary Jane 2-pack. It's the only one that has the glowing chest logo and the glowing eyes. Some people didn't like the way that was implemented, but the one saving grace is it does have the lighter blue and the brighter red, so if you didn't want to get one of the other ones that had that color scheme, this one is a viable option. It doesn't use the best body we've ever seen, but it does have some unique attributes, and it definitely has the unique webbing, which is the very kind of geometric look. So if you're into this kind of look, it's not the best figure in the world, but it's the only one of this, and it's not bad at all, so I think you might be okay getting this one. Here is the Superior Spider-Man, if memory serves. Yeah, I know I should probably know these things, but I don't necessarily. I think I do, though. And this one's actually not a bad figure at all. It has some really great articulation and some issues, of course, with the anatomy and whatnot, but it is an all-around really, really solid release. It didn't come with a few things people thought it should, but it still gets the job done. I suspect we'll see an updated version sometime soon. However, I don't think the updated version is going to have better articulation than this one, so it's going to be kind of a trade-off situation. But this one's a really strong release, and if you're into this particular look, it's your only real option, but I think you'll like it anyway. It's one of my favorites in some ways. So I think you guys might be okay with this if you're into this kind of thing. All right, speaking of Hasbro reusing molds and every Spider-Man looking the same, not every, but a lot of them, this is the infamous Pizza Spider-Man, which did see a re-release, which is on the card back there, and the vintage card, which is almost identical, slightly different issues for the coloring here and there, but this is the first of this mold. He does have an exceedingly long torso and relatively short legs, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't like this mold. It's a valid criticism. It is, however, the best, I think the best standard Spider-Man that Hasbro... Spider-Man, that's an interesting way of saying that Hasbro released. It's not bad. If it wasn't for that weird long torso and short legs, it would be a really solid release. This one does have some glossy paint issues, and the vintage one seems to be better than this one at that, but it's a little bit less saturated. So my go-to, if you're going to go for a Pizza Spider-Man body Spider-Man figure, is this one. This is the one that came in the SDCC exclusive Raft 6-pack. It is a darker blue, so if you're not into that, that is unfortunate, but it does have the unique, more McFarlane-esque eyes, and as far as I'm concerned, it has a much better, well, it's not as far as I'm concerned, it does have a better quality finish. The paint isn't glossy in some places as much as this one is. I know they all look shiny because of the lighting, but this one's really shiny, and this one's just normal. So if you're going for a basic Spider-Man, don't care what color blue, this is the way to go. And since it does have the better eyes, as far as I'm concerned, this is by far the best of the more neutral-looking Spider-Man figures. SDCC Raft 6-pack, to be clear. Here we have, again, like I said, same body mold for a bunch of these guys. This is the House of M Spider-Man, which is one of my favorite looks for Spider-Man. It just, to me, it doesn't look right on this mold. It's not bad. The paint job's clean enough, but we have a very different red for the chest and the arms, and it makes it stand out funny. And I don't think the eyes suited as well as they could, and I just don't like the long torso and short legs. But other than some random House of M Spider-Man that came out forever ago that's really, really hard to come by and I don't have, this is the only one you can really get. So if you're into it, this is your choice. And it's not terrible, so you'll probably be okay if you get it. But just be aware, it does have some consistency issues with the red. But it's not terrible if you don't mind reusing all the same body parts as almost every other Spider-Man of recent history. Speaking of reusing body parts, here we have another one. This is the other Ben Reilly, which makes the other older one completely obsolete. This one does also come with the parts with the big crazy head and the hands and stuff. So if you're into interchangeable parts, that is a nice addition. And here's the thing about this one. They nailed the paint job. The spider logo that wraps around the torso is exceptionally well done. It's not perfect. This is still a $20 figure. But it is really, really nicely done. The black has a nice glossy finish to it, whereas the rest is nice and matte. And it's pretty cool. I'm getting tired of them using the same head for so many figures and the same body, but regardless, this one does stand out on a shelf, and I think many of you really like this one. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, this was on one of my top 10 lists for the year it came out. So that means it has to be good. That's an official thing. Okay, let's look at this. This is... obviously, this Scarlet Spider, the one with the blue hoodie and the metallic red body, which looks fantastic. I love this. There's one thing about this that I think is better in the initial release, which is the one that's back there, which we'll look at in a minute. But this one on its own is very, very, very nice. You know what? I don't know. I don't know which one I prefer, honestly, now that I look at both of them side by side-ish. Okay, let's do it. All right, so here we have the metallic one and the non-metallic one. The non-metallic one has a little bit more yellow in the red, a little bit darker blue for the hoodie, darker belt, things like that. But the thing that really stands out, other than the gauntlets being completely different, the eyes have black around them on the lighter red one. And so, I don't know. I like the black around them, but I think if I had to pick one, I don't know now. I like them both in different ways. Which one do you guys like best? Do you guys like the one on the right or the one on the left? I'm kind of torn. I thought I liked this one more, but now that I see them, I think I like this one more. You know what? I think I like them both equally, but for different reasons, and we're going to leave it at that. But these are both exceptionally solid figures, and if you wanted a Scarlet Spider, then this, no question, easy purchase, very, very nice. No problem at all with those. All right, since I had to move this one to get to that one, let's look at the Red Hulk Build-A-Figure wave black suit Spider-Man using a completely reused body, except for the head, and it is not good. It does have shading on it and a relatively clean paint job, so it was, acceptable, but is basically completely obsolete now. He's got a little tiny peanut head that's smaller than his neck, terrible anatomy, terrible sculpt work, and is all around just not good. The articulation's okay, I guess, but that's about it. And so paint job and articulation does not a good figure make. So let's set this one aside. Let's look at this one, which is the single-carded black suit Spider-Man, Symbiote Spider-Man. It did get a reissue with Kraven in a 2-pack. As far as I know, it's the exact same one. I never opened that 2-pack, though. It's somewhere in the house. I don't know where it is, so I couldn't check. But I'm pretty sure it's the exact same thing. But solid black plastic with white spider logo, white eyes, white hands. And that's it. But that's all it needed. And they did a clean enough paint job that I'm perfectly happy with this. They do not need, unless they come up with a better body all around, they don't need to redo Black Suit Spider-Man. This is perfectly good. I like it. I like everything about it other than the base body they used. But even then, it's acceptable. So as far as I'm concerned, this is an exceptional release as far as these go. So go ahead and... Come on, camera, what are you doing? So go ahead and get this if you're into Black Suit Spider-Man. If you're into Black Suit Spider-Man but with weird things on his eyes and big funny feet, then this is the way to go. It's the exact same body, but it has a different logo, and it has the eyes that are not connected to the head, which I know that's accurate, but it's really silly, and I don't personally care for it. But if you do, it does have that, and it has the claw hands and the big feet, and some people are into that. I'm not, but if you are, it's a good figure. It is what it's supposed to be. I am objectively okay with this figure. I just personally don't understand why his eyes would not be connected to his head. But it's a good figure, so we'll leave it at that. Speaking of figures that got remade recently, we have this one, which is this one called Scarlet Spider also? I want to say it is. Yeah, because it's, I think it is. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, this is the black and red Spider-Man. Did I get it wrong? I don't think I did. Dang it. Well, whatever. And this came out on an old body, which is kind of updated from that terrible black suit one. Some parts are the same, some parts are different. You can see it's nowhere near as ugly as the black suit one, but it is definitely not a great release. So it's a good thing it got replaced. It's definitely good enough at the time. It was good enough at the time. It's good enough if it's the only one you have, but this one is significantly better. This one uses an entirely more current body, better looking sculpt by far, and it has some nice accessories. The only real downside to this guy is that the head is still kind of weird. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that's what it's supposed to look like. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. The eyes are so sunken in. Like, that doesn't look like a human's head. You know what I mean? It's just kind of weird looking. But otherwise, the figure's really, really solid. Obviously, the anatomy is significantly better than this one. Less dynamic looking when you pose it, but still a solid release. All right. We're going to just keep talking about figures that use the same base body. This is the 2099 Spider-Man, which I absolutely love. There is an old release of this guy, which is part of the Spider-Man Classics line. Not a great figure, but it was good enough at the time. As far as I'm concerned, this one far surpasses that. The metallic blue is really nice. The red is painted on well enough. The head is sculpted. They did a really clean job on the head. He has his little translucent cape back here, the claws and everything. It's a really strong release. Only downside, other than the paint not being perfect, but that's to be expected, is the long torso and short legs. Still a really nice release, one of my personal favorites, and so I'll just leave it there. Now, I told you guys I was going to tell you probably which one was my favorite, and this won't do you any good at all, but I'm going to tell you right now it's this one. I absolutely love this new Spider-Man 2099 figure. It's not perfect, but it looks great. I love it when they mix white in the Spider-Man suit, and this one has a really clean paint job, really nice articulation. It's just one of the most unique Spider-Man figures on the shelf, and I enjoy it a whole bunch. There's really not a lot wrong with this. It's not perfect. It's a $20 Hasbro figure, but it's one of their better releases. And if you like the 2099 look, it's your only option. So that makes it even better. But it happens to be a good figure. So I think you guys will probably be really into this. Nice metallic spots on it. Nice clean paint. I love that one. That is by far my favorite. Here we have a really old release which looks like a really good figure. And in the sculpt department, it is. There was also, by the way, a gray version. I think there might be a couple slight changes in the sculpt. I'm not positive. I haven't owned one of those in a long time. But there is a gray version where the blue is gray. But this one is the Cyborg Spider-Man with like the robotic parts in the arms and the not concave, but hollow chest. And it's just a really, really cool figure. It doesn't pose great in the torso, but the arms and legs are basically standard. So you'll be able to get some decent poses done. Very unique looking, and I think it's a must-have for any Spider-Man collector just because of its uniqueness. It's a lot of fun to own and to look at, and maybe pose if you're not trying to do too much craziness. Next up, I wanted to include the Superior Venom. Is that what it's called? Oh, crap. I think that's what it's called. The Superior stuff is not stuff I'm familiar with, and I think that's what it is. This is the one where Peter and Doc Ock are like the same person, and they did it with Venom, and they had this baby. I don't know. But it's a decent enough release. It's fairly accurate. It's kind of weird looking. The tendril thingies get in the way of posing and looking cool, but it's relatively well done. Uses the same body again for the most part, so that's kind of annoying, but it does have the claw hands, kind of, and the feet, and the head, and the things on the back, so, yeah, I mean, it's a nice release. It's fine. A lot of these figures are fine. None of them really stand out as being great overall, but a lot of them are just fine, so if you like it, get it, and you'll be okay with it. You'll be fine with it. Alright, here we have one which hardly is comparable to the other ones, but this is the Spider-Man Noir figure. It's basically a solid black figure with a couple different finishes going on, a couple of different slight shades of gray that aren't quite black, but still really darn close. And it's fine. If you are into Spider-Man Noir, it's your only choice, but they did a good job with it. It's not a great figure, but it's definitely good enough, and it does fit that spot, so go ahead and pick one up if you want. Next up, I want to look at Spider UK, and you guys are probably going to be able to guess right off the bat why I like this design so much. They mixed white in the suit, and I think it looks great. He is on the bulkier build, and that's fine, I think, for him. He does suffer from some articulation issues, but it's okay. As far as Spider-Man figures go, he's probably the least articulated out of all of them, or at least least functioning. Golly, English, man. English. Least functioning articulation-wise, but he does look pretty cool on the shelf. The paint job's clean, so if you want to just stick him on the shelf and make him look like a hero, I guess you could do that. It's a fun release. It's alright. I'm glad they did it. I wish the camera would focus, but there we go. That's fine. So this is the problem. You guys have probably seen the camera pull focus more often than I have. It's because I have stuff in the background, but if I take the stuff out of the background, people get bored and they don't want to watch the video. So I have to leave the stuff in the background, but then the camera pulls focus. If I set the focus right here, then it stops focusing. If I move the thing, it's just a hassle. So hopefully it wasn't too bad, and if it was, then I'll just delete my channel. Alright, here we have the 6-arm Spider-Man, which is a release that was very, very controversial. A lot of people really wanted it. They made it using a lot of the ASM2 parts, which is weird. And then obviously it has some new parts, but they didn't put any paint on it, and he's very like neon, bright red, and it's just a really weak release in so many ways, and in some ways it's kind of cool, but doesn't make any sense because it doesn't fit the comic looks. It matches the ASM2 look, but it's bright, and it's just weird. Really weird, bad articulation, and just a very, very strange release. So I really wouldn't recommend this unless you absolutely wanted a 6-arm Spider-Man that looks like this exactly. But I wouldn't recommend it. Speaking of things that look like that exactly, here's one that looks like it a little bit, because it uses a lot of the same parts. Obviously this one has all spider arms, and is a dark red and dark blue, and has the head and the feet and the hands, but it still suffers from basically the exact same issues. I mean, it's still based on that ASM2 body, and it has no paint job, like there's no web detailing in there, so the sculpted webbing just looks weird. And it seems very cheap. It's less cheap seeming than the other one, but it's still not a great release. So if you want a Man Spider figure that looks like this, it's your only option, so get it, I guess. But it's still not great. It's okay, that's it. Here's the thing. If you want a Man Spider figure, track this one down. It doesn't pose very well, but look at that. It is so not the same as all the other figures. It doesn't look cheap in any way. It's got a great sculpt, a lot of paint on it, it's big, it just doesn't pose for crap. But if you're okay with that, then it's fine. And I really am glad I have it in my collection. It's going to just stand there and look cool, but that's all it needs to do. Stick it in the corner of your shelf, and it'll look cool up against your other collection pieces. And that's it. So there's your Man Spider, and I think every Spider-Man collector should have this. Alright guys, we're in the home stretch. Alright, here's another old one. Another one which I suspect will see a new release very soon. Big Time Spider-Man uses a lot of the same parts as some of these other ones, and it's not particularly good, but they did a really good job with the paint, and so that's okay, and that's really about it. It really should be updated. It does have some of the newer parts, like we have the better sculpted lower legs and forearms, but all in all, it's still a pretty lousy release, and definitely due for an update. It'll do if they don't. It's not absolutely terrible, but it definitely should be updated sometime soon. Alright, let's look at this one, because we're talking about things that got updated. This one is basically the exact same figure as that one, but it got updated. Obviously, this one's known for being well over-painted. I still think it has this kind of an appeal to it because it does look very much like it's glowing and it stands out on a shelf and has kind of a fun look to it, whereas the one that replaced it definitely lacks a little bit of the character and is a lot more boring. Yes, this one reused a lot of the same parts from other figures at the time, but the new one, well, let's just go ahead and take a look at the new one. So this is the new one, and if you're not too sharp, you probably didn't notice, but it is the exact same body as about 10 other figures that we've already looked at. So it definitely loses a little bit of its appeal. They definitely didn't do any of the light up paintwork at all, and they made the green kind of dull. It does have the good head as far as this body goes, as far as I'm concerned, and the paint job's not terrible, but it is just a whole lot less fun. To me, this one looks nice on a shelf. This one doesn't look bad on a shelf, but it looks kind of boring. So you're going to have to decide for yourself which one you like if you want the Big Time Spider-Man. Did I call this one Big Time? I meant to call this one Future Foundation, and there's probably already been comments on it saying, oh, you dumbass, you called it the wrong thing. But whatever, that happened. So you have these two options. I personally like this one in a lot of ways, but obviously this one is better in some ways. So you just really have to decide for yourself which one is the right one for you, or do you like me and get both? Because the measure of a man is the same measure as how many pieces of Spider-Man collectibles are in his collection. Alright, so let's look at this one. Iron Spider, another one which I think is going to be replaced very soon. And this one was definitely part of the offshoot line, the Spider-Man Classics line. It had at least one other version where it was a lot more paint on it, but the paint was super sloppy, even though the colors were nicer. And so I got this one, which has not a lot of paint on it at all, but I preferred the colors, but it does look really cheap because the red is kind of transparent, and these things suck, and it's not a good figure, but it's the only one we have, so I don't know, check it out. Some people like the painted one more, some people like this one more. I don't think any of them are worth much at all, so if you wanted to grab them both on eBay, you probably could for pretty cheap. But I do suspect they'll be making a new version of this because of the inclusion in the new MCU movies, and because this one's old and crappy. It'll do. It'll hold the spot, but it's still pretty old and crappy. Alright, here we go. Almost done, guys. We made it. Almost. So this is Spider-Punk. Is that what he's called? Spider-Punk? Guitar Man. Spider Guitar. Something like that. And so this is actually a really solid release. They did a really good job with the jacket. They put the spikes on his head, which they should have. He's got a guitar. He's got a guitar holding hand. Up here for the strings, one for the pick down here. The pick is in his hand. They gave him his sneaks, and those look good, and they changed the suit underneath, and that looks good. It is mostly the exact same body again, which is getting really tiresome. But as far as this goes, it's one of the better releases. I don't know how widely popular this is, so it's probably not that relevant to a lot of you, but if you're just collecting Spider-Man figures anyway, then this is one you probably want to get. Like you guys know, probably, if you know me at all, I'm not musically inclined in any way, and I still like this figure a whole bunch. So you might too. The guitar, I'm guessing it's not supposed to be solid white, but it is. So if that's supposed to be, then cool. If it's not, then that's kind of a bummer, but that's the way it goes. Alright, so we're not going to talk about that one because we already did. It's just a re-release with some slightly different colors. But we are going to talk about this one because this one is my second favorite Spider-Man figure because it is such a unique design, and it's not really Spider-Man, but it is. It's Spider-Hulk. And so this is an older figure, for sure. It has a gimmick in it, which sucks, but was common back then. You do this, and he puts his arms up in the air, and that's all fun, and that's it. But the thing is, this guy's built on basically they took the old design from the Planet Hulk body, which was the best Hulk figure ever for the longest time, at least body-wise, and they redid it completely to be Spider Hulk. So it's completely unique. It does have articulated fingers. If you like that, cool. If you don't, then I don't blame you. But it has enough articulation to be fun and more than enough design elements to be fun. This guy is definitely going to stand out on your shelf. An absolute must-have as far as I'm concerned. That's why I wanted to save him for last. Is it the best figure here? Not by a long shot. But is it the most fun? If you're going to play with it, no. But if you're just going to look at it, just maybe. It just might be the most fun to look at, and it's definitely going to stand out. So you have to get this if you really, really want to have a cool collection. This is it. This is the one you need to have as far as I'm concerned. And since you're watching my video, I'm guessing you are concerned with what I'm concerned with. And so there you go. Spider Hulk is my second favorite, only because he doesn't really count. I do prefer this one the most, though. But he doesn't really count. So if I had to pick, I'd probably go with this one. But he doesn't really count either because none of these are actually traditional Spider-Man figures. So which one do I pick? Well, is it this one? I don't know. Because that's not really a real Spider-Man figure either. It's a very specific version. So these guys are all in my top running. But we're going to end it out with the one that I think I would pick for me personally. If I had to have just one classic Spider-Man figure at the Marvel Legends, I would go with, and I know it doesn't look like much right now, but I'm still going to personally go with this one. The McFarlane Spider-Man is my personal favorite. I'm not going to say which one's the top 10 or top best or whatever. Maybe I'll do that if I want to milk the channel for some more views before everything explodes. But I do think I would pick this one as my personal favorite classic Spider-Man. If I couldn't go with that one, though, I would go with this one right here. The Raft Spider-Man. I like the overall composition of it the most. And so I would go with that. So now you guys have at least some options. If you wanted to know which ones I think you should get, this is probably the best batch right here, as far as I would say. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know we've talked about a whole bunch here, and you might have to watch this video in multiple sittings, but now you've seen every Spider-Man figure, at least that I own, and all of the Marvel Legends one, not counting movies, and a whole bunch of extra ones. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I have no idea how long this video is. I think it's like an hour. Oh god, did I just make an hour-long video? Well, we'll see what happens. But if you made it this far, just let me know which Spider-Man you think is the best and which one you think is your favorite, and we'll talk about it in the comment section below. Again, remember to check out my social media places just in case the channel explodes, and get ready to buy some Gambit heads and some Beast heads and all that fun stuff. So thanks again for watching, guys. If you made it this far, you're awesome. If you didn't make it this far, you're not hearing this, so you suck, and I can say whatever I want because you're not here. And that'll do it, guys. So see you in the next video, and keep collecting.